What is up, Facebook land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce my special guest, Nick, I want to make sure that I dedicate a show, even though I wasn't supposed to have a show tonight. Well, I was supposed to have one, then I wasn't having one. Now I'm having one. I was going to take a break, but I'm like, I'm getting antsy. I need to have a show. So I put a little post out on Facebook, and Nick stepped up to the plate, and you're going to love his story. I'm going to dedicate this show to coaches. Any coach that has ever taken out of their time to help another person get better at whatever they're doing, a sport, strength and conditioning, whatever the case might be. Coaches are a vital component to the evolution of children, teaching them skills that they're going to use later on in life. And especially if you get a really good coach that connects with you in a way that is meaningful, that it almost can last a lifetime, your connectivity with them. So tonight's episode is dedicated to coaches. And you'll hear why I made that dedication here in a little bit when we talk to Nick. The podcast can be heard anywhere, iTunes, Stitcher, Outcast, Pocket Cast, any other cast you can find. You can find it there. Now, my man, Nick Maruca, we met, I don't know, 4 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
So Nick is, I met him through Coach John McKenna at Notre Dame High School. Nick was, there it is, wearing the hat, little Irish pride on the hat there. Nick is affiliated with Notre Dame and Coach McKenna, and I got to know him through Coach. And Nick's got he won't call it a disability, but the rest of the world does.
True.
Nick has cerebral palsy. And Nick, if you see him sit, and you look at him, he is just jacked as all hell. He is as athletic looking an athlete as there is. But he wasn't always that way.
True.
He had to work hard, and Coach McKenna was a huge part of your evolution as a youngster to becoming a young adult, and the path you chose in life. I would probably venture to guess Coach McKenna had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, big time.
So without further ado, my man, Nick Maruca, how are you, buddy?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for popping on for this.
Oh, absolutely. As soon as I saw it, I knew I had to take the chance, man.
All right. So you've seen the show. And I asked one question. And the question is going to be, who is Nick Maruca?
Ooh, that's a loaded question, man.
Yeah, get after it.
I like to think of myself as someone who everything I do in life is about other people. And a lot of that comes from how I was raised. My parents were like that. My parents do a lot of charity work, always have. So I grew up in that environment of always helping others. And then, like you said, when I met Coach and I started my journey in fitness and lifting, athletics, more so than when I was a kid, because I always played sports. But I knew when I was in 7th, 8th grade, I wasn't most likely going to be able to play at the level that I used to, and I also had a very severe intensive surgery when I was in 8th grade for my CP. They did like 9 different procedures in one operation. I think it was like 5 or 6 hours. And pretty much at that point is when I started to really get into lifting and coaching. And I think Coach brought me in under his wing to help him as a coach when I was like 15. And that's when I got the bug, as they say. And I realized, CP never defined me as a person, because every obstacle I ever had, I overcame it. And I approached it with this may be difficult, but I'm going to get through it. I'm going to find a way, to make it better. And I would fall down 1,000 times and I would get back every time, So when I got into coaching, I said, look, if people are going to ask about my CP, which eventually they always do, I'm going to use it as a platform to motivate and inspire the kids that I coach, because at that time it was mostly youth athletes. 6th, 7th, 8th grade was what I was coaching at that age. They're so vulnerable to pretty much anything you tell them, and they're gonna suck it all up. So I knew what it was like to be that age, because I went through the same program that I was coaching these kids in, and I established these relationships where they know that something is obviously off, without having to ask me. But then at the same time, you see somebody who's doing the things that I was doing in regards to coaching and lifting. And, it was inspiring other people and motivating them to want to be better people. And at the end of the day, as a strength coach, the workouts and everything are going to fade away. But if you can find those few people that you connect with, the way that I did with Coach McKenna, and I'm blessed to say that I've been able to do that, that's what makes it worth it. So being someone who lives their life in service to others and is always there to try and just help other people and do the best that I can do to make everybody else's life better, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
So what's the Notre Dame slogan?
Strong life, strong faith. No, strong mind,
strong body,
strong faith equals strong life. Yeah.
Yep. So
but then there's the it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about others line.
Yep.
It's always a good one.
and you think about that. A lot of times you hear some coaches are rah-rah and don't have anything to put behind it.
Mm-hmm.
No action behind the words. And then you have the ones that live what they speak.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
And I think there is I think there's plenty of guys out there like us, like you, like Coach McKenna, but they're just not. They're not out there telling everybody about them,
right?
Because they're humble, right? They don't want everybody to think that they're braggadocious or anything like that. And it takes moments like this where I get a chance to share you with my audience and Coach McKenna when he was on, and other amazing people that are living their lives in service of others. I think it's just a really awesome way that I get a chance to take people that are in my network and in my friendship circle and share them in a way that maybe you wouldn't have done on your own.
Absolutely.
Had it not been for this opportunity. I mean, this was a shot in the dark 20 minutes ago. I posted on Facebook, it was like,
right.
And something drew you to say, hey, I'll do it. So let's talk about coaching.
Sure.
Well, actually, you know what? Let's go back in time even before that. Let's talk about cerebral palsy, because as you know, I train a girl named Erica Greedy, who is a cerebral palsy athlete. She never would have called herself an athlete until recently, but now that she's
doing
competed,
very well, that's what I've seen.
Now that she's competed, she's an athlete. Tell us about your journey with cerebral palsy. What has it been like? What was it like as a kid? I mean, because I grew up with a brother with learning disabilities, and a severe stutter, so I know what that was like. But that was all inside.
Right.
On the outside, he looked normal. There wasn't anything physically different about my brother. What was it like having cerebral palsy growing up as a kid?
I feel like I could say I got lucky because I have an older brother. So when I was real young, pretty much everywhere he went, I was there. So the people that were around me were very used to it. And because of that, I never really saw myself as different. I didn't know what it looked like on the outside till I was much older, and I would see old videos that I would do from gait analysis and stuff, and I said, wow, that's really what I walk like, and maybe that's why people look at me kind of funny. But for me, I always was involved with athletics. I started playing soccer when I was 6-7 years old, and that was pretty much my physical therapy at the time, because I had gone through a surgery around that same age, and after I got done the surgery, my parents didn't want me to be defined by my CP. They didn't want to harp on it and make me feel like I was any different. So they got me involved with sports, and I played soccer up until I was 13 or 14. But then in the summers, I would do baseball and tennis. I did pretty much every sport you could think of I played. And I think because of that, it made people desensitized to it, because the way that I view it, I always make fun of it. You probably know that enough. Like, if I can have someone that's comfortable enough with me to joke with me about it, that's how like I have a good relationship with that person. And I think people think of disabilities in such a weird light that if I were to make a joke and someone doesn't know how to react to it, they're always like, oh, like, is that funny? It's like, yeah, I mean, even at St. Francis now, it took a long time, but like even the football players there finally started to like crack jokes to me, towards the end of the semester. And it's like, that's when people know it's okay, and there's a stigma, but at the same time, I always felt comfortable because I was always in such a good support group that I never had to think of my CP. That's not saying that I didn't struggle, because I definitely did. Wintertime always is tough. My muscles in my legs are always tighter in the winter. So that by itself makes things more difficult. The amount of times, like I said, I used to fall, but I like to say I perfected the art of falling because, it doesn't really hurt me anymore. I mean, even a couple months ago, I was at St. Francis. We were in a weight room. Oh, God, what happened? Oh, one of the guys, I gave him like a tap on the shoulder. He didn't see it was me, and he shoved me really hard into like a rack of medicine balls. and I and I fell, and the guy was like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "No, man, that was kind of funny actually." So it's like, it is what it is. Or I'll trip and I pulled a dumbbell down and like fell, like hit me in the back, and it's like, stupid shit that's gonna happen when you're in a weight room is amplified when I'm around, and it is what it is. You kind of just roll with the punches, and if you have a sense of humor about it, it makes things a lot easier. So, I was also lucky enough that the doctor I have for my CP, Dr. Miller, is probably the most renowned CP doctor in the world. And he always brought me in to do different studies with other doctors, because they used to think that lifting with CP actually made it worse. And then I came around and everyone was like, oh, well, maybe that's not the case. So they came in and saw what it did for me. And now he takes videos of me lifting all around the world to show other doctors that, this is possible if you set your mind to it. Now, I've done speaking engagements with other kids with CP, like support group kind of things that are in high school or younger. And a lot of times those kids don't have the same attitude towards it that I have, because people on the outside, either their teachers or friends or something like that, don't view it the way that I do. And they feel bad about themselves because of their CP, because people shelter them into, oh, you can't do this or that, and you have to stay inside for reasons because we don't want you to get hurt, blah, blah, blah. And that's the complete opposite way you need to approach it, because if I was like that, I would have never turned out the way that I am, and you get the scrapes, you get the scars, and it is what it is. But at the end of the day, I can say, I'm a success story because I've overcame all that. And what I do now as a strength coach, people probably never thought they would see a Division I strength coach with CP before. So it's a pretty cool thing, I could say.
And I think that there's several things that I noticed when I met you, and I met you with Coach McKenna.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was probably a couple of hours where I was watching you where we said hello, but we didn't really have a chance to talk. And I was watching Coach with you. And one of the things that I admire most about Coach is that he is consistently the same with the non-athletes, the football players, the girls lacrosse players,
yes,
and you. There's no change in how he coaches his kids and the amount of love and expectation he places upon them. And when I would watch him with you and how he would just ride you like a rented mule and tell you got to get and it was like, I'm like, all right, I see what we got going on here.
Yeah, it's hard, man. It's hard. Like when we were in high school, it was like he put me through some of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And I guarantee you, if someone from the outside would have seen what he was doing, they would have thought the guy was out of his mind, because there were times that I did, but I sucked it up and I still did it because I was like, going to say no, and that made me extremely tough. It made me realize that nothing is as hard as this is ever going to be. So, I mean, I could tell you I couldn't do it right now, those workouts, but it shaped a lot of who I was growing up, because I started working out with him when I was 13, and I'm now 28 years old, and I still, I talk to him almost every day. I get fortunate enough that I was able to work with him and still do. And, now I bring so many of his principles that he taught me into my coaching. And it's interesting because I was telling you before we got on here that I coached the cheerleading team at St. Francis, and they were telling me that every strength coach they've had before me has never cared as much as I do. Because, I really take the time. They come in once or twice a week, but those times that they come in, people don't realize or don't see them as athletes, even though they are. They compete at a very high level. They're not just going on the basketball field or football field and doing their little dance. They compete at national level. And I coach them like that, but at the same time, I'm also someone that shows up to practices, even though I don't need to. I'll show up to their competitions, and they said no one else has ever done that before. And to me, it's like shocking, because the way I was raised and the way I was taught to coach, that was just a natural thing. And at the end of the year, they gave me a nice little present that had SFU cheerleading on it and stuff like that. So it's those little things that are so rewarding as a strength coach that you don't even realize that you do half the time, because it's just the way I am. So for someone to notice that and realize that, I care enough to do that for them and get it reciprocated is a cool feeling.
And that, when you talk about the principles that you've learned, and when I dedicated the show to coaching, those are the things that I was talking about. Is I had a mentor growing up. I didn't necessarily take sports as seriously as I probably could or should have, mostly because I had a problem with authority. And but my mentor is a guy that the things that I learned from him, he was a cop in the town I grew up. The things that I took from him that I heard and felt and understood are still the things that I practice today. And I think when you have somebody like Coach McKenna, who didn't care if you fell, would tell you to get up and then make you do the exact same again. And even if you fell 100 times, you're going to keep doing that until you got done falling and decided to stay up on your feet. But the caring component, that dedication to your athletes, the showing up at practice when you didn't have to, that shows them that's we talked in the very beginning about there's a lot of rah-rah shish boom bah coaches who don't have the action behind it. And if you're going to talk about we and team and doing things for others, and it's bigger than one person and all those other cliche things that are cliche if you don't have an action behind it, when you bring that action behind it, that's what proves to your athletes that you're there for them.
Right, exactly.
And that's what Coach put in you.
Exactly. And what goes hand in hand with that is, as a strength coach, when they see that, then they're going to want to work 10 times harder for you in the weight room because they don't want to let you down, and I see it every day. And I was lucky enough to be named the NHSSCA New Jersey High School Strength Coach of the Year, which, I will tell anybody that I don't think I deserve, because that's just how I am as a person. But, I know Coach McKenna had a big part of that. And I even go back to my sport coaches way back when I was playing soccer. Same thing. The way I used to walk then versus now it was so much worse back then, because essentially what was happening is my body was growing so fast that my muscles couldn't keep up. So everything was all out of whack back then, and I used to fall all the time. And we would go through drills in practice where you'd make it like a human ladder with bodies, and I would go through my friends' bodies and step on their backs, and everyone would be laughing their ass off even though they were in pain, Or I played baseball, and when I would get on first, I would end up stealing the base because nobody was ever prepared for it. But my mom would always have a heart attack because she thought I was going to get hurt, But every point I've gotten to in life in athletics or now, no one has ever told me that I couldn't do something. And I think that's the biggest reason that I turned out the way that I am. So, again, big thing for coaches is the way you treat other people. Without you realizing it, it ends up making a big difference later down the road.
So after you graduated high school at Notre Dame, and you started really getting involved in the coaching component of it and working with Coach McKenna, what was your first official strength coaching job outside of Notre Dame?
Well, I did my internship. After I got done at Temple, I did my internship at the Underground Strength Gym with Zach Evanish. And then after that, I was the head strength and conditioning coach at what was called Advantage Performance Training. It was a privately owned gym in Flemington, who Paul Collodi used to own it, who was the head strength coach at Herndon Central. And then after that closed, I became his assistant there for the past couple of years before I'm at St. Francis as a grad assistant.
So you went from Notre Dame High School with the legendary Coach McKenna to Zach Evanish, who is a legend, right? To Paul Collodi, who's a legend. And now you're at St. Francis University, a Division I school, as a grad assistant strength coach. What's that? When you look back at your journey and you think about your 28 years of life and the struggles and the cerebral palsy and the just how your life has sort of evolved, and how God's placed legends in your life, whether it's your older brother who protected you and made sure that you didn't feel different, to the friends that you grew up with, your mom and dad, to the coaches that you had as a kid, to your time in Notre Dame and Coach McKenna, and then all the legends that you've been exposed to.
Right.
Do you ever sit back and go, I'm actually blessed with everything that has ever been in front of me?
All the time, because it's funny. I was talking to one of my cousins the other day, and we were just talking. He goes, "Dude, your resume is ridiculous." I was like, "Yeah." When you think about the people that I've worked with, who are people that from around the world, people are clamoring to hear and work with it and stuff like that. I sit back all the time and I was like, how did I end up in this situation? And when you think back to it, it all comes down to the fact that when I was in 7th grade, my parents knew that I was going to need help later on in life. And they were the ones, my dad actually got in contact with Coach McKenna about his youth programs that he runs. And that's how I got involved in it. And did I think it was going to become what it is? Absolutely not. Neither did my parents. They always say that. They're like, oh, you're getting too big, blah, 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 blah. But, the people that I work with are some of the greatest people I've ever met, hands down. And because of them and all the other connections that I've made, I've finally gotten to this point, at St. Francis where I feel like I got a break. Even though I'm kind of old to be a grad assistant, I took those couple years off just because I needed a break. And, I've been looking for full-time for a long time, and I got this, and I know that after next year when I finish, I hopefully I'll have no problem, finding another job after that full-time for the first time, finally getting the full-time strength coach job. But, it's a blessing to sit here and say that I know those people and I've been through what I have, because I can use those experiences to help other people. And the friends that I have and the coaches that I know, they don't look at me any different either. They understand who I am and what I've been through. And it's such a tight-knit group that if it wasn't for those people, I don't know what I would be doing, because my entire life, from such a young age has revolved around strength and conditioning, that people ask me all the time, like, what would you do if you weren't coaching? And I have no answer for that, and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else, because I know that being a coach is where I can have the greatest impact, whether it be at, a high school level or a college level, it doesn't matter. I know that no matter where I go, if people are going to see me and understand my story and take the time to hear it, then it's going to make, someone else's life better. And that's all that matters to me. But it is a blessing, because it could have been so much worse. There's a quote from Coach from a few years ago. We were in the newspaper, and he said, he goes, I don't treat Nick any differently, because, what would it have done if I, sheltered him and stopped him from doing what he could do? And, you just let people with disabilities work in with everybody else, because if you include them in everything, then there's going to be no stigma. There's going to be no woe is me kind of thing, because that's not going to help them, develop into better individuals. And hopefully, that trend starts to happen. And if I can be a person that can help that, go along, then, that's what I want to do.
I've been blessed in the fact that, I've lived many different lives in the last 48 years. I've done everything from being a hoodlum and smoking weed and stealing stuff to joining the military and being highly decorated and having military secrets, to being a cop for 26 years and doing so many different things with that, and being an entrepreneur and inventing equipment and just doing all kinds. I've done.
Yeah, I will say the Max Out Tower is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It's like ingenious.
Well, wait till you see the new device that we just launched. That's replacing that thing. That makes that the tower is a VW compared to the Lamborghini we just did. Yeah. So, but for me, one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me was getting a chance to be around people like Coach McKenna and his network of people that he's impacted. When you look at a man and you look at the depth of his heart and his compassion and his dedication, and you look at that and you just see the network of people that he's impacted. And I've only seen a fragment of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that fragment is immense, and it's
right.
in the voice that it has, and how I just love seeing, because there's 5,000 Nick Marucas out there that he's impacted over the years.
Right.
That every time I'm at Notre Dame, it never fails. A former student comes in who's 34 and happened to be driving by and had to stop in and see Coach McKenna and give him a hug and just say, man, this guy changed my life. And I hear the stories, and they're not telling me this because McKenna's paying them to show up and make himself look good. These are just random moments that I just happen to be there. And if I was there 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, I guarantee there'd be 2 to 3 a day coming in doing
that. Right. people ask me about him all the time. They're like, what is it? I said, I can't explain it to you because my relationship with him is entirely different than most everybody else's,
He does call you his son. So
yeah, true.
He goes, my son who walks weird. That's what he told me. Yeah, that's my kid who walks weird.
When I started with him, he didn't know what he was doing. We both had no clue. And he just tossed me in there, and we just see if it's gonna work. All right. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out. And when I started lifting, I don't like to tell everybody this because it's kind of embarrassing for me from how I am now. But there was a student there. His name's Chris Kavanaugh, and he would be like my workout buddy. While everyone else was in the group doing whatever coach was doing with them, he was working out with me individually because I was so low level at that point that he needed to help me through pretty much everything that we were doing. Even if it was just a simple jammer, like I struggled. And people don't understand that like things are not easy for me, even if I make them seem that way. It's not. And thinking back to when I could barely even do a squat, or I couldn't deadlift. I didn't touch that until I was way older. Because I had to learn myself on how to mobilize and stretch and everything else. But it also made me a better coach because having to do that for myself, I could then transfer it on to my athletes. So much of it was trial and error and figuring out what worked for me, that I can use on everybody else. But, those early years of struggling and when nobody else saw it, I think about it all the time because it puts in perspective, a lot of the things that I could do now. I just hit like a 325 deadlift straight bar. Nobody with CP can probably do that. You never heard that. But am I going to say that to people? No. I might have just on this podcast, but I'm such a humble guy that I don't think of things that way. And like I said, when people tell me that well, that's amazing, I'm like, it could be better. I am so hard on myself because of the way that I was coached that it's never good enough. Is it impressive? Sure. But it could be better. And there's always that next step of what's next. And coach instilled that never give up attitude in me. Well, I always had it, but he just reinforced it, and he helped me believe that no matter what I was struggling with, I could eventually get through it. There was one time in the summer, I remember it was me and Zach, and we were doing, how long that front room is. It's pretty long. So we had to do farmer's walks up and down for a lap with 80s or maybe even hundreds. It was heavy. And then a bear crawl for that exact same distance for 10 sets. I'm telling you right now, I sat there for about half an hour when it was done because I couldn't even move. And this was like a few years ago. And people ask me why I do it. Sometimes I don't know, but at the end of the day, I walk in that room and it's a place where you're going to work your ass off. There's no way around it. And now it's interesting because I've been there the past couple of weeks subbing, and there are gym classes that come down there. Some of them don't know who I am nowadays, which is kind of weird for me. But some of them do, or there's athletic enhancement class that he has down there, and he'll be sitting there. But I end up coaching the kid just because it's so natural to me that I want to help them. And then they're like, wow, I don't know who you are, but thanks, and they end up learning, they figure it out. But it's so cool now because I know he's sitting there probably in awe of the fact that I'm just now training his athletes, and everything is so full circle that thinking about it and really saying, hey, this guy created what I am now, and now I'm back here, helping him and coaching his athletes. There's nothing better than that.
One of the cool things I've learned, and over the last 4 or 5 years, I really started working with people with disabilities and stuff like that. And I have Erica, who's my cerebral palsy client, who recently competed in a Paralympic meet. And I was really hoping, so in order for her, we had not a very good meet because I was actually coaching her wrong on how to do shots. Hard to believe. But what I got out of it, the positive I got out of it, which was a negative, was that I wanted her to be classified as an F33, which is a lower functioning cerebral palsy athlete.
So is that what I would essentially be?
No, you would be an F34.
Higher.
You would be an F34.
Okay.
And an F34 has much more expectation on their physical capability.
Okay. Because I've thought about doing powerlifting meets. I just never knew how it would go.
Yeah, you go and there's about a 45-minute medical exam essentially,
Okay.
Where they put you through all different kinds of tests based on your disease or disability and spasticity and all kinds of things that they're looking for. Anyways, what happened was I had trained her so well physically that the things that would have been her disability that allowed her to qualify as an F33, a lesser capable athlete, now made her a more capable athlete, which made it harder. Now it's not just to throw farther, which we're going to figure out. But it was one of those things where I'm like, she was literally a foot away from making the Olympics as an F33.
Wow, yeah.
So, but to me, when I look at you and I say, okay, you could easily just be a dude with cerebral palsy who likes fitness, maybe does a jazzercise class or something. But you trained your body as if you were a professional athlete since you were 13 years old.
Right.
And there's nothing that I watched you do some amazing physical feats of strength that just make no sense whatsoever based on the biomechanics of your body.
Right.
Right. Shouldn't be able to do that, but it doesn't. And I think that's the coolest thing that I've learned as a strength coach, quote unquote strength coach. I'm a max out strength coach. I'm not a regular strength coach, but understanding how the body works and understanding how to create new muscle fiber and understanding what that can do in a regular average athlete, let alone what it can do with somebody with a stroke or cerebral palsy or ALS or MS. I just think it's so amazing when you get to understand how the body works that there's really no limitation if you properly stimulate the area you're trying to create.
Exactly. I mean, the way I train is no different than anybody else, depending on the movement. I mean, I goblet squatted for a long time before I even put a bar on my back, It took me years. I only just started back squatting maybe 5-6 years ago because of all the limitations I have, but I worked to improve them so that I can do that now. Am I ever going to squat without a box? Probably not. I always use a box just because it gives me something to go towards, and I know that I'm hitting my depth. But did I ever think I'd be hitting a 315 plus deadlift? No. I could do more on a trap bar. I know I've been doing trap bar for a long time, but I wanted to get back to strap bar in case I did decide to start competing at some point. But still, and just double overhand, which is even harder. And my bench is like 265. But it's learning that everyone's built differently, but that doesn't mean you need to do different things. The basic strength stuff is always going to be there. It's just progressing it and regressing it depending on the person. And everyone's able to improve. If you know what you're doing at a high level, you're going to be able to help anybody out. So it just takes time. Everything is time based. Would I want to be able to hit 405? Yeah, but it's probably gonna take me a couple of years to hit. But
you'll hit it.
Right. Eventually I will, and the determination to do that and having goals is the biggest thing. Because people ask me all the time, how do you keep doing it? And it's like, because some of my workouts are the same all the time. They don't change except for the weight and the intensity and all that stuff. And it's just having that goal in mind that I want to get towards that I know I'm going to. And there are days where I question it myself. As like I said, it's always going to be harder than others than it is today. But it makes you who you are. And if I can ever compete in something like that, I would do it. I mean, sometimes it's hard for me to say, hey, maybe if I want to do a powerlifting meet, I'll have to classify as a CP person. Does it kill me inside? A little bit, but at the same time, it's like, it still counts. Still lifting the weight. And there are things that I do sometimes where I do have to take a step back and I'm like, how is that possible? And it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't. But it's the fact that it is if you take the time and put the time into it to make it possible. I mean, 15 years, that's a long time to keep at something. And that's what most people don't have, is they don't have that mindset of like, everything wants, the instant gratification nowadays is so ridiculous that if people aren't losing 20 pounds in a week or whatever it is, they quit because they don't want to they dedicate themselves that much to something when that's what it takes. And, if I can be an example of that, that's cool for me,
Well, brother, I truly do appreciate you on the show. I think it was very surprised show for everybody because this wasn't planned. And I think what they got was an amazing story.
Thank you.
About overcoming, about mindset, about having someone to inspire you. And I think it's what people need to hear. That's why I do this show, because these are the things. There's enough negativity in the world. There's enough bullshit being fed to everybody every single day. And what they need is some realness. And I think what I try to bring every week to every show is realness. And you nailed the shit out of it, dude.
Thank you, man. Did you see what CJ said?
Yeah, I saw. CJ wrote, "Please don't stand up. I don't need to see you fall." And that's Coach McKenna's son. So just so we know. But anyways, I wanted to tell you, you're going to be the first to hear this. There is going to be a full-time strength coach opportunity at Springford High School.
Okay.
That'll be coming up this coming school year at some point in time. So just so you know, in case you want to keep your ear to the grindstone, that would be a very good opportunity. And at a very good school with a brand new 10,000 square foot strength and conditioning facility they're finishing up in July. So I think that'd be a great opportunity. And I think you would completely dominate there. So if you're interested, when I know it's posted, I will make sure you get that link. And I will put my whatever my 2 cents is worth in for you. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere. Everybody, thank you for tuning into this pop-up special edition of the 2 Dates and a Dash podcast. I am your host, Matt Cubbler. And once again, thank you to my man, Nick Maruca, who is an inspiration to us all. Cerebral palsy did not limit him whatsoever. All it did was give him a reason to fight harder. And I thank him for being on the show and making the time tonight. Everybody go out, do something great tomorrow, and for God's sakes, be kind to one another.